Hi guys, I said I was going to paint in this for a month, so I'll show you what I've been up to. Today is the 1st of September, the first day of spring. So in my previous video, I mentioned that I was going to be doing daily paintings for a month in my Hobonichi. So I thought I would show off what I've done and kind of some of the ideas behind it. And also what it's like painting in a Hobonichi. So these were the pages I did in the original video. It was interesting. So part of me wanted to really embrace that kind of painting, and part of me really wanted to kind of, there's a bit of an autopilot I go to, and a lot of these shapes are my kind of autopilot mode. So this was me trying to actually embrace a more painterly style. So rather than having strong, defined shapes like I did here, how could I make it a bit more painterly, a bit more blended? I do like the vibe of this. I just feel like I can't really tell anything that's going on. It's a bit incomprehensible. But I do like the overall vibe. This one also was done very lightly, but you can see here these bits of bleed through. So I found with the golden, what I have to do is not mix my acrylic with any water, which is a challenge because it does mean the paint's a little bit thicker. So I've noticed when the paint's extra watery, it seeps into the paper and causes some like bleed through. It doesn't help that the next page is very blue. So for this one, I really wanted to kind of push my understanding of color. So this is a phthalo blue in green shade and in red shade. So I thought it'd be interesting to have like these two blue shades, two blue colors with different shades, and see how they interact. I am colorblind, so it is very like, sometimes hard to tell what's going on. Next up, we've got this green one. This definitely falls more into my like previous style, these kind of bubbly lines. But for this, I wanted to have the green not be solid, but instead be, so you can see that's the full color. Instead, just brushing it on and letting the transparentness of the paint kind of pull through. One of the things I'm quite interested in is how do I get this like kind of texture and line work, and how does that kind of add more dimension? Because while I like these sort of paintings and my previous paintings, they do feel a bit flat. What you see is what you get. With this, I feel like there's a bit more depth, and you can kind of explore visually as you look through kind of what's happened, which I really like. I think you can tell the days in which I kind of go back to autopilot. So this is definitely one of those days. This one was actually quite interesting. So for a long time, I've considered having gradients in my background and what that would look like. So this is a Titan Violet Pale to a Titan Green Pale. They're both from Golden. For this one, I wanted to have a gradient to experiment with it. So I used a combination of the high flow. This one's actually one I really, really enjoy. And you might have started to notice that I do have little to-do lists at the top to try to add more to the page. I don't use it every day, just depends on what I'm doing. Yeah, this one I really enjoy, especially it's just like really spiky, kind of spindly forms. I like the way that that's really one of my favorites in here. This one, don't even ask me what happened. Again, I was trying to kind of brush in these shapes without a sketch underneath and kind of see what happens, but then also trying to add this, kind of mirror this form. I would say this is definitely unsuccessful. However, one thing I have noticed is when using a lot of golden acrylic, it's quite shiny and glossy, and I think with gloss on gloss, they do stick. So I have found myself using scrap paper, or I've even started to use grease-proof paper, also known as parchment paper, to protect my pages. These two are definitely kind of more minimal. So this one's just straight up carbon black with, you know, the paper showing through. I've been quite interested in how cut-off shapes hit edges and what sort of happens there. I think this is quite interesting. I don't think I've even used black in any other page in this book. And then this one I also think is quite interesting. It's kind of spindly, almost like plant-like structures or a leaf or coral. Yeah, I've had some ideas of getting like this shape kind of cut out and put into a sculpture, like what happens there. These ones were definitely other ideas that I'd had building away for a while. So this idea, the same way this is like a cutout shape, again, these cutout shapes and what happens when they're more spindly, more kind of... Today's the first day I've been using the word coral, but I do find coral to be fairly accurate. You can see here I've tried to kind of add more painterly in the background and then stamp it on top. This one was quite interesting using white, obviously white on white, but what happens with those like kind of the way white brush marks are captured. So you don't really have a color, but you do have like an interesting texture in there. Here are two really strong opposing views. So this one was, what if I take this form and make it really thin and spindly, almost like very thin and sleek. And then this one, I was like, what if I make it really chunky? I don't think it translates as well here, but essentially it's that same shape, except the width is really thick. So then what happens there? Also, I think I'd like this almost as like, what if it was a piece of green metal that was cut out and the black was all just the wool underneath? I did try to add some drop shadows, but I don't think they read really well. All right, so here's where something we've played with, which I rarely ever play with in my practice, is overlaying paints. So I had this blue mark first and then painting straight over the top, and how that kind of creates these transparencies and different layers, so that shape's kind of broken up, but then kind of behind and in front, and how that kind of tricks the brain. Together with these movements, I think there's a lot of interesting actions kind of happening there. This one, I think I was playing with more gradients in these ball forms, as well as this kind of more lightning effect. It's interesting, some days I don't record the paints I use. Other days they're such custom colors, so sometimes it's directly from it. But like this one here, there's a combination of phthalo green yellow shade and carbon black in the shades, and then carbon black to create these like little shadows. This next page, really bare for me, but I do enjoy it. Something I've always enjoyed is these kind of shapes painted on white, and how they kind of both represent like this kind of half done form, but then a full form as well. This one actually, I remember correctly, I've erased all the drawing lines, but I drew lots of different shapes I liked on top of themselves, and then just kind of picked parts of it. So you've kind of got that more cloudy, bubblier form, but then there was like this spiky star through here. And then I was like, well, what if I just outline this part and take that? And there's some of those bubbles kind of come in together with the corally spikes. So yeah, this was quite interesting. I think you could think of a lot of like kind of childlike paintings you would have done with kid picks, when you kind of do a big scribble and then fill in parts of it. This one, don't have much to say, but I was interested in what if instead of having these kind of cuts through the page, what if they kind of fold in, and what happens there? This one was almost a negative of itself, so I was quite interested in using this Southern Ocean blue color that I just have and never use because it's so transparent. What if I was to do the same shape over 2 days? They're not identical, but just quite interested in how they play off each other. And I think there's something interesting here as well, like one of the ideas I had when I was thinking about doing this project was, oh, I could always use the same idea over multiple days and experiment with different paint palettes. So this was something kind of interesting, like, would I prefer this more as like one of those cut out metal shapes on a wall, or would I prefer the cut out negative on the wall? I don't have an answer, but just it's interesting, I think. This one here, I've been doing a lot of research on futurism, so I was really trying to like pull it all in and really get a lot of motion. I think I'm reminded of some early Pokemon card designs. They have all these like kind of vortexes to show motion. This one, I decided to break away from the square and do a more rectangular form. I hate it. This was a big boo-boo. So I was like painting it, and I went to like get more paint, and the paintbrush just like slipped out of my hands and hit right there. My plan was to cover it with like a light yellow kind of circle, but it's interesting. Some of these paintings have been kind of started on one day and finished on another, but I do try for the most part to keep each painting done in one session. See, this is what I mean. So these are definitely probably the most painterly ones. And I don't think they're done. Again, like, you know, the day came apart, but I think adding more of these kind of corally, glyphy kind of action motions on top, like what happens when you've kind of got these sort of motions and these and these. I'm just interested again, like in how I can capture all this like dynamism and action and energy. Yeah, and again, I guess it's more painty, and I think there's more things to look at versus like this. Like I still like it, but I feel like it's what you see is what you get. Here, there's more things to look at in Vision, although they do feel a bit, now that I'm looking at them in the daylight, they do feel a bit amateurish, I think. There's more to be done as I explore that. So I am actually going to Japan very soon, which I'm super excited about, as you can imagine. However, taking all these paints with me just isn't gonna work. Like, you know, I mean, I think it would technically be able to be my carry-on, but also if they explode on my clothes, it's just not worth it. But more importantly, the drying time of those. So, as you've seen here, I've got some Posca markers. I decided to get them in light orange, lavender, and coral pink. I think the three of these are quite like dynamic and interesting, but could also work by themselves. So my plan is, while I'm in Japan, I'm gonna make some of my paintings in here using these. And it's me. I'm probably gonna end up buying some art supplies while I'm in Japan. So I think that will add to the next level. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So I think the big things I found while painting in a Hobonichi is, my plan was to backfill all these entries, but just doesn't feel like very authentic anymore. So I might end up just leaving them blank. But I really enjoyed it. I've definitely learned a few things, such as you have to use these paints just straight up. You can't mix them with water unless you want bleed through on the next page. They can stick as well, so little bits of butcher's paper really helps a lot. I found that these pages are probably the most stickiest. Yeah, so if you want to start painting on Hobonichi, I would recommend using a soft body acrylic or a fluid acrylic, but don't use an airbrush paint. I would recommend don't use any water, just straight on here. But they do layer, so if you really wanted to have something more detailed, you could just do a layer of paint and then paint on top of it. I did consider gessoing my pages, but that did feel a bit much. And from the research I've done with these, it feels like these should work fine as long as I'm not too heavy-handed. Fingers crossed though. Yeah, so for the weekly pages, in case you're kind of worrying about that has fallen a bit to the side. It has been so chaotic. You can see I started off pretty well, but like that's this week. I've got a dentist appointment that I didn't even attend. Yeah, I am finding life and the balance of life a bit challenging at the moment and really, really stressful. So I'll use this when I need to use this. Today's been a really good day for spring, so I'm excited to see what happens next. Lastly, I'm so glad that I brought this clear container. The amount of just like studio gunk that's been ending up on the outside, I'm so happy it's protected. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll do another update on this as I go through it, and have a great day. Bye.